Among them were the third prince, Fabian Severus, and the fourth prince, Neruvian Severus. Both looked visibly bothered and unimpressed by their surroundings. The second princess, Violet Severus, offered thanks for all their efforts. The Duke stepped forward, introduced himself properly, and greeted the royals. Neruvian, clearly impatient, complained that they should just get this over with and leave. This visit was purely symbolic anyway. Fabian remarked that no monsters were going to ambush them out of nowhere. The Duke reassured him that the creatures stationed at the rear were minor threats at best. Besides, their top knight was with them, so they were in safe hands. Ashel emerged right then, noting it had been a long while since he'd seen his father. The older man eyed him with pride, expressing confidence in his ability to handle the job. Fabian gave him direct orders to wipe the enemies out before they even got close. Unlike him, their corpses held actual value. The princess shifted focus, asking about Luenel. He wasn't one to skip official visits like this. Ashel replied that Luenel had handed the task off to him due to pressing matters elsewhere. Though still unsure, she didn't push it, remarking that she was lucky to have him as her bodyguard instead. Alice shared the confusion silently. Ashel was always seen guarding the first prince, yet here he was, standing beside the royal daughters. She decided to dismiss it as coincidence. He met her gaze, mentioning he'd heard she joined the Knights of Light at the top of her class. His stare carried a chilling, almost violent intensity, and he congratulated her. The look unsettled her. His eyes held a menace she recognized. It reminded her of her 9th birthday, or close to it. Back then, he had gifted her a magical scroll. It was a 4th star spell, far beyond what she could use at the time, clearly meant for later. Years passed, and once she gained her 4th star of mana, she recalled the scroll and prepared to activate it. But just before she could, Cecilia had stopped her, telling her it was a summoning spell, one that would have unleashed a mid-tier monster. If she had triggered that scroll, it likely would have ended with her dead. Now she couldn't shake the thought that he might have known exactly what would happen when he gave it to her. Her suspicions about him only kept growing. The royal convoy, along with their army escort, began moving toward the battlefield. Neruvian questioned why Luenel had sent him to them. Fabian muttered that the whole thing felt sketchy, maybe even deliberate. Someone like him getting slotted in as their personal guard? Definitely worth raising eyebrows. The princess cut in, reminding them that they already knew the kind of person Luenel was. If they didn't want to wind up dead, they'd better stay alert. Suddenly, the caravan ground to a stop. Everyone stepped out to check what was going on. They saw Alice sprinting toward them, panicked, yelling about screaming. An ambush had begun. They needed to get out now. The attack came from a rare creature, a Tsareurk. The ground dragon let out a piercing roar, sending a wave that hurled soldiers backward. The guards didn't stand a chance. Alice rushed to pull the princesses out of danger. The beast's tail came crashing down, aiming to smash through the guard lines, but she summoned a mana shield to block it. The barrier gave just enough time for the princesses to escape. She couldn't believe it. How had a high-level monster ended up this deep into their secured territory? Something wasn't right. Down in the dirt, the princess heard Ashel speak up, vowing to protect them and urging them to come closer. And that's when it hit her. This whole ambush might have been part of his plan, a way to kill them under the cover of chaos. Right then, Cecilia arrived, launching her Wind Blossom spell to drive the monster back briefly. Alice grabbed the princess's hand, trying to lead her to safety. Something felt horribly off. Back when he looked at Violet, there had been real bloodlust behind his eyes. She glanced back and saw him standing next to the dragon like he belonged there. She shouted his name, telling him to watch out. A barrier flared up around Ashel, launching the monster backward with force. He clicked his tongue in irritation after noticing that both the princess and Alice had already slipped away. The creature lunged again, but he, now visibly pissed, leapt into the air and struck it down in a single blow. Elsewhere, Violet, Alice, and Cecilia were sprinting toward a safer zone. Suddenly, Violet stumbled and collapsed onto the ground. Alice rushed to her, checking frantically if she was all right, offering a hand and asking if something was wrong. The princess gave a faint smile and said she wasn't going down that easily. Before Alice could react, a blade drove straight into her body. Cecilia had attacked from behind, betrayal as brutal as it was unexpected. Shocked and reeling, she managed to gasp out a question, asking why her friend would do this. She crumpled to the dirt, a vital organ pierced, shrieking in agony. Violet stood over her, explaining that she was Ashel's younger sister. She had suspected something was off the moment she learned Luenel wasn't attending, especially given how obsessed he was with being part of everything. She believed this was all a ploy to quietly remove them under cover of chaos, letting others take the blame while they stayed clean. Alice tried to explain, insisting she only wanted to protect people, but Violet cut her off, saying she already knew how power-hungry the Verts and Luenel were. She mocked the idea of sitting still and waiting to be executed like a fool. She told her to spit out her last words while she still had seconds to spare, laughing as she added that maybe Luenel would swoop in and rescue her in time. She tossed down a scroll, an emergency teleport and summon spell, to warp both herself and Cecilia away. Left behind, Alice lay stunned. She couldn't wrap her head around what Cecilia had just done. Some part of her refused to believe the betrayal was real. Maybe it was mind control. Maybe there was another reason. Tears slid down her face at the thought that her closest friend had turned against her. She glanced around. The area was crawling with monsters. Forcing herself to rise, she whispered that she had to pull it together. This wasn't where she was going to die. She had to survive, and she needed to know why her friend had done this. Blood seeped from her wound, and she used it to enchant a spell, turning it into razor-sharp blades. Meanwhile, Violet and Cecilia reappeared inside a secured safe house. The princess looked much more at ease now. Cecilia was quiet, clearly trying to mentally erase any trace of Alice or their shared past. Violet asked why she'd spared her. There had been plenty of chances to finish her off. She reminded her that the order had been to kill, not let her go. Cecilia calmly replied that Alice wouldn't last long anyway. The monsters would finish the job for them. Back in the field, Alice was holding her own, fending off the creatures with what little strength she had left, but her body kept giving out. She kept thinking, what the hell was she supposed to report to the knights? No one would believe that Princess Violet had tried to kill her. She shook it off and focused on survival. Escape came first. Then she turned and saw it. A lava salamander. Not just any beast, but a top-tier monster. If she didn't get out now, she was toast. The salamander began charging a fiery blast straight at her. Her body wouldn't even twitch. Right before it unleashed the attack, Cyan materialized, slicing through the creature mid-charge with rushing fog sword. The beast hit the ground hard, molten lava bursting from its body on impact. Brian rushed in, catching her mid-collapse and helping her escape to safety. She looked up at him, realizing that if he was here, Cyan had to be nearby. Suddenly, her salamander-affected arm got hit. The two of them ducked behind a rock as lava exploded around them. Before the flames could reach, Karam appeared, summoning a lava wall to shield them. She shouted at Cyan to take out the rest of the monsters. Alice was still stunned by the events, unable to process everything that had just gone down. He leapt forward and unleashed Void Sphere, wiping out all remaining threats in one strike. Once the chaos had cleared, she stepped toward him. She'd suspected the truth for a while now, but seeing it confirmed in front of her hit hard. She reached for the mask and pulled it away. Her eyes welled up. She saw his face. Brian stayed focused, hands glowing faintly as he tried to seal up the gash on Alice's side, while Cyan crouched nearby, attempting to walk her through the truth behind everything. He explained that Cecilia hadn't been acting on her own. She had been planted by Princess Violet from the start. She muttered that she hadn't realized until just now, and admitted bitterly it made her feel like an idiot. Even so, she still intended to move forward with her plan, to erase her family's legacy, no matter what. He cut in, telling her none of this was on her. The blame sat squarely on Cecilia, Violet, and Ashel. She blinked in shock, asking if Ashel had really been the one pulling the strings behind all this, and whether Cyan knew something about it. After all, this whole mess traced back to their father. He didn't hesitate. He was sure Ashel had pushed the idea onto their father, and she knew just how far he was willing to go when it came to him. She stared, puzzled, asking why someone would go that far for his sake. Cyan told her flatly it was so Ashel could be the one to shape the family's legacy as he saw fit. Her expression darkened, twisted with fury. She couldn't believe he'd go as far as murdering his own sister over something so meaningless. Her knees buckled, and she dropped down, still not fully healed, still worn out. She looked up, voice low, asking if he was absolutely certain about Ashel. She'd thought she was the only one who'd sensed something was off, but Cyan had noticed too. She warned him their father and the others had to be kept out of this for now. Whatever this was, Ashel had a secret weapon she didn't. During the earlier fight, something had felt wrong, like an unseen force was shielding him. Cyan's eyes narrowed. That sensation was way too familiar. He'd felt it once before, in another life, at the moment he tried to strike him down. Something had stopped him before his blade could land. He still didn't know what the hell it was. Some force that reached past the body, messing with the soul. A cursed sword? Something darker? Only one explanation made sense. He said they were out of time and needed to speak to their father now. She nodded, but he shook his head. Their father wouldn't believe them. Not a chance, she pleaded, saying if they both came forward without delay, maybe he'd actually listen. His tone shifted, serious now. He told her to trust him. If she acted recklessly and things went sideways, the entire Knights of Light could turn on them. In his last life, Ashel had always been the Golden One. Everyone had adored him, looked up to him like he was sent from the heavens. Even Cyan had once followed him without question. People treated him like a messiah, never doubting a word he spoke. But looking back now, Cyan couldn't help but think something about that had always felt off. The way Ashel had been adored, it wasn't just admiration, it was worship. And if some still questioned him, they never said a thing. Even their father, an emperor who'd died chasing his own dreams and fears, had trusted Ashel completely, not a shred of doubt. Cyan had clung to that trust too, right until the end. When the betrayal hit, he'd felt nothing but rage. And one nagging question kept digging into his mind. What the hell made everyone believe in Ashel so blindly? But the answer had always been right there. It was him. Cyan said it aloud. Ashel had become an untouchable icon, carrying the divine authority of the most revered god in human history. He was the chosen one, humanity's supposed savior. Meanwhile, on the rear end of the battlefield, the royal guards had formed a shaky perimeter around the princesses, trying to keep them safe. The girls stood frozen, shaken to their cores, unsure what to do as the ground rumbled beneath them. A massive earth dragon lunged forward, claws raised to strike. Then Ashel appeared, cutting in just in time to shield them. The dragon launched another strike, but he raised the shield of judgment, blocking the blast for everyone behind him. Then, in a blur, he shot toward its face and split its skull in one swift blow. The beast crumpled dead. He asked if everyone was all right. Cheers erupted, voices chanting his name filling the air. Even the princesses started singing his praises. Alice stared, stunned. She couldn't wrap her head around it. The savior? Chosen by Lumendel? Cyan, standing beside her, told her plainly. Lumendel hadn't chosen based on character. He just needed a savior. That's it. And since Ashel had been chosen by the supreme god himself, denying it now was basically heresy. She'd risk turning the whole church of Lumendel against her. A weight settled behind her eyes, a slow, sinking disappointment. She'd placed her faith in Lumendel her whole life. And now, this. She turned to Cyan, asking how he even knew all of this. He avoided her gaze, telling her he couldn't say. Not yet. He'd already interfered too much. She placed a hand on his shoulder, steady. She trusted him completely. If he couldn't say, there had to be a reason. But one day, she said he needed to tell her. He didn't have to carry it alone. Then she pivoted toward Brine, giving him a small nod of thanks for patching her up. Cyan looked at her, asking what she planned to do next. She didn't hesitate. First, she had to deal with this mess. That meant finding Cecilia. She needed to hear the truth straight from her. He offered a hand, literally, summoning a porcelain gate pointing to Cecilia's last known location. Back at Violet's safe house, Cecilia suddenly felt a strange mana signature ripple through the air. Someone was getting close. Violet scoffed. No one else knew about this place. They didn't even have time to blink before a blade whirled through the air, narrowly missing the princess's throat. Cecilia's eyes widened. She knew that sword. It was Alice's. While that played out elsewhere, Ashel arrived at the last known location of Alice and Cecilia. He picked up the remnants of a magic scroll and immediately suspected it had been used for teleportation. Without wasting time, he told the soldiers nearby to sweep the area and check if any shelter was close. One of the guards called out, motioning towards something, and brought up a question. Would Princess Violet be all right? They all turned to see a corridor littered with what used to be salamanders, now ripped to shreds. He issued a sharp order to secure both princesses without delay, then took off to investigate whatever had done this. Over at the safe house, Cecilia had been tailing Cyan for quite a while now. At first, she'd assumed he'd be incredibly skilled. His mana pressure and killing intent had been off the charts. But in the end, he was just a kid. Still, something felt off, like someone else was backing him up. To close the distance, she cast a spell that flung her forward, aiming to catch and strike him directly. But just before contact, he vanished right out of her range, slipping past her blade like smoke. She barked out a question, asking where the hell he'd learned to move like that. Nothing from her world matched it. He didn't respond, not a single sound. She pressed on, demanding to know about the sword and whether he'd saved Alice, but again, nothing. He stood there, wordless. Frustrated, she amped up her speed, attacking in bursts, slicing in from all sides as she circled him. She thought to herself that only a handful in the Knight's Order could keep pace with her, and this kid was managing it. When she leapt to attack from above, he slipped away again like she was moving in slow motion. That's when it hit her. He was faster. Not a little, a lot. And he still hadn't drawn his weapon. The fact that he didn't even bother made her snap. Her temper flared, and she lunged from behind, gripping a jagged rock, going straight for his blind spot. He tanked it without flinching. Before she could blink, he conjured a void sphere, calm as ever, layering it with an obsession spell. The moment it connected, her body started unraveling from the inside. Crashing to her knees, she knew she was done. Pathetic, she called it. A humiliating way to go out. This wasn't the kind of place she ever thought she'd die in. She called him Grim Reaper, half in awe, half in horror. Even then, she asked if he was seriously just going to stand there silent, even now. Desperate, she begged him to at least answer one thing. Was Mr. Leximus still alive? He dropped to one knee, eyeing her curiously. He asked what kind of expression that was. Was that relief? He admitted he'd expected something messier. Anguish, maybe. She gave a faint smile, telling him to think of it as justice finally cashing in. That this ending, ugly as it was, kind of fit. A voice rang out across the space, asking, "Justice for what exactly?" Alice stepped into view, eyes locked on her, asking how she could do it, how she could betray her. The other woman looked up and smiled weakly, eyes wet, saying she was just glad Alice was still breathing. Alice screamed, cutting her off, demanding an answer. She wanted to know why she'd lied all this time. Years back, her village, just a nameless dot on the map, was wiped out by monsters. Every building gone, every person dead. She'd been the sole survivor, barely clinging to life. She'd thought it was the end right there. But then came the sound of voices, a rescue squad combing the wreckage. They dug her out from beneath the collapsed rubble. Despite the shortage of supplies, the princess overseeing the mission had food and water rationed just for her. It was nothing short of a miracle. She had been pulled from death's door by either royal knights or rafters. She couldn't even remember which. And the one who took her in after that was Violet. From that moment, it felt obvious. When someone saves your life, you owe them yours in return. Later on, the chance to repay that debt finally came. A direct order from the princess. She was told to infiltrate the Vert household, keep an eye on them, and wait for further instructions. That's how she ended up planted inside as a maid, and through that, she got to know Alice. But now, looking back at it all, she wasn't sure it had been worth it. A part of her wished she'd just died with the rest of her village, buried with the rubble and silence. Then came that day. They'd all been standing by, waiting for someone to show up. Violet had pulled her aside and given the command, "Kill Alice." She was labeled a threat. Alice, stunned, asked why Violet would see her as dangerous. The maid answered without flinching. The princess had always seen the Vert family as suspicious, ever since she noticed how closely Ashel and First Prince Luenel were aligned. To Violet, that loyalty meant the Verts were probably backing Luenel, and in the paranoid world she'd been backed into, that assumption only grew worse. She spiraled, gripped by fear and distrust, because that's who she was, someone who only trusted herself when the walls closed in. The would-be assassin gave a faint, bitter smile, saying she was nothing like her, and wondered aloud how she'd spent her whole life taking orders from someone like that. And the worst part? Alice had trusted her the entire time, and in return, all she had done was betray that trust. That's when Cyan snapped awake and cut through the moment, calling it what it was. Bullshit. If she thought admitting guilt was some kind of free pass for forgiveness, she was way off. Alice tried to step in, asking him to slow down, give her a second to figure out how she felt about all this. But he raised his blade toward the kneeling woman, cold and unshaken. This wasn't a minor offense. She shut her eyes, ready to take whatever came next. Alice screamed, pleading with him to just listen a little longer before doing anything final. Brian held her steady, whispering for her to put her faith in Master Cyan. The sword came down toward the condemned. Back at the safe house where Violet had holed up, the silence shattered as the door slammed open. She immediately demanded to know who dared to break in. Calling out for Cecilia, she suddenly realized she had no idea when the girl had disappeared. Ashel stepped into the room. He told her he'd come to get her out. A sharp draft crept down the princess's spine, her thoughts snagging on one question. How the hell did he manage to track her here? She flashed a calm, almost mocking smile, noting how he was practically radiating intent to murder. With a sharp edge to her voice, she called him out for barging in uninvited, tossing in how insanely rude it was. He met her gaze, voice level and frosty, admitting outright that killing her was on the to-do list, and that Fabian, Neruvan, and she were all supposed to be casualties, taken out by the monster. She threw it back at him. There was no way in hell he could walk away from something like that without consequences. Her hand went for a teleport scroll, but he shredded it mid-move, coldly stating that he wasn't finished here. She asked if he was seriously planning to carry that scheme all the way through. He answered with a shrug of uncertainty. Maybe, maybe not. Her eyes scanned the room, and that's when she spotted Cecilia's blade jammed into the wall. He demanded to know where his sister was. She hit him with it. She killed her. She admitted she wasn't entirely convinced the girl was working with Luinen, but blood was blood, and that was enough. Still, no regrets. Then she flipped the question back. What now? Was he here to avenge her? He shut that down, saying he was rethinking the whole strategy altogether. He commented on her composure, how she was keeping it together while dealing with threats she didn't fully trust. Cutting off loose ends like that was a smart call, and he was honestly impressed. She wasn't like Prince Luenal, not even close. That rattled her. She stared, wide-eyed, unsure how he could talk about his own sister like it meant nothing, unsure what his angle even was. He stepped in closer, saying the whole thing was doomed anyway. He planned to report to Luenal and tell him straight up. It all fell apart. She instinctively moved back, asking what the hell he wanted from her. He proposed she side with Enon and join his plan. She raised an eyebrow, confused. Wasn't he backing Luenal? He threw her a casual smile like it was obvious. No one said they were allies. They were just in it for mutual gain, nothing deeper. She sat down on the edge of the bed, skeptical, not buying it. He answered without blinking. Believe it or not, Luenal was part of the plan. She smirked, asking if this was about taking over the Empire, because if it was, she wasn't getting involved. He turned his back, saying he didn't give a shit who ended up ruling. His real mission was bigger. Wipe out evil completely. Strip it from every corner of the world. She laughed under her breath, thinking he was full of crap. but something shifted in the air, and he picked up on it instantly. Evil had just made its presence known. A warped, malicious manna flooded the space, sending chills straight through his bones. Was it bloodlust? It sure felt like it. Whatever it was, he'd never sensed anything like it before. The room suddenly tore apart. Walls, ceiling, all of it, getting pulled into the churning dark energy of the manosphere, the void sphere. Ashel locked eyes on it, frozen. He waited, expecting something, anything, but Cyan didn't hesitate. He launched forward and struck. The other man reacted just in time, redirecting the blow at the last second. He demanded to know who Cyan was. The swordsman responded without blinking. He was the evil Ashel had been chasing, and also the one who'd bring his end. Their blades crashed together, the two of them clashing hard, ricocheting across the space with such force it sent shockwaves, even catching the princess in the crossfire. Ashel threw up a mana barrier around her, shielding her from the fight, and moved her away from the destruction as the safe house started to tear apart. The next hit sent him flying, thrown far off course. She called out, checking if he was okay, but he was barely keeping pace. Cyan's pressure was relentless. He pushed back with a full-force attack, loaded with adamant energy, and hurled it toward his opponent. Ashel followed up with an Escalon incantation, slicing the manosphere clean in two. The split protected them both, briefly. Cyan teleported behind him in a blur, catching him off guard. No time to counter, no chance to dodge. He went for a finishing blow, but right before the sword connected, a glowing shield activated and blocked it. Karam let out a guttural scream, like something had just torn straight through her. Cyan froze, thrown back by the force of the same barrier. The mage turned to her, watching closely. Something about this wasn't normal. He tried to steady her, assuring her he'd get through this, no matter what. Cyan stared at her, confused, asking what was happening. She barely got it out, saying it felt like her whole body was being shredded from the inside. Must be his power. It sucked for both of them. Ashel stepped closer, questioning why Cyan backed off when he swore he'd be his end. Then he moved in again. The other man hesitated. Sure, he'd love to finish this, but now that he'd seen what the mage's magic was capable of, he knew he needed to retreat. He tossed something at them, Cecilia's sword and her bloodied shield. Violet reacted immediately, demanding to know what he did to her. He answered flatly. He purified her. Ashel studied him, asking if that was the endgame, wanting to know who gave the order. Cyan said nothing about orders, claiming the mist. That's who he was from, the ones who never forgive. He didn't do this because he was told to. He did it because it had to be done. And yeah, that confirmed it. The rumors were real. The mist was back. Before Ashel could respond, Cyan faded, his body breaking into air and vanishing like vapor. The mage's expression darkened, something heavier settling in. The realization hit. The mist had been sabotaging him from the beginning. Later, far from the battlefield, Karam was still curled up in pain. She admitted it. She honestly thought she'd die back there. Cyan asked if it still hurt that much. She nodded, struggling through the words, saying it was the worst pain she'd ever felt. Even if they wanted to take him down, they couldn't touch him. And this was way more tangled than she ever imagined. He said there might be a way through. Then he revealed it. Durandark's elemental stone. The purity of the gods. It was just a theory, but he believed this could give them a shot. She grabbed his hand, pleading with him not to do it. She knew the risk. This could kill him. He knew too. It was dangerous as hell, but it was the only viable path. He had people to protect, and he refused to repeat the mistakes of his past. If the enemy's strength was absurd, then he'd just have to become absurdly strong too. After a while, Cecilia finally prepared to depart. Before leaving, Alice handed her a small token. Marianne's token. Access to the spirit realm was tightly controlled, but with it, she would be able to enter Farina without issue. Alice warned her to stay alert. Tears spilled down the knight's cheeks as she thanked her profusely, voice trembling with apologies. Alice turned away coldly, making it clear she hadn't forgiven her, warning never to show her face again. Cecilia nodded, understanding the severity, and said she would be going now. Without another word, she left immediately. Nearby, Cyan and Karam had observed everything. The demon asked if he was certain it was okay to just let her walk away like that, insisting it would be better to kill her now. He responded that in his past life, he had already ended her. Reflecting on it, he realized it wasn't necessary. She was already shattered by the guilt of killing his sister. This time he had eased some of that burden. He was confident she would repay this debt eventually. Hours earlier, when he struck her, he had only wounded her shoulder. He remarked that she had died once just now, but he spared her life, warning he would collect his due later and instructing her to stay hidden until summoned. She remained puzzled about why he spared her instead of finishing her off immediately, as if he could see the future. It felt like he foresaw a moment when she could make amends, and if that time arrived, she vowed to pay him back with her life. Karam kept watching him, asking if he was unwell or something, noting how unexpectedly soft he had become lately. Alice approached, and Karam asked if she had already sent the knight off. She nodded, crediting her for it. Alice apologized for being late, but thanked the demon for saving her previously. She thought quietly that maybe she could get along with the demonic sword. Perhaps it wasn't so bad after all. She laughed softly and asked if Karam was close with Cyan. The demon denied it, explaining their bond was more like master and subject. She fixed Alice with a serious look, warning that his body belonged to her, so Alice shouldn't try to take it away. That instantly killed any hope Alice had of getting along with her. At the academy, Dean Kendall received a message from Cecilia. She explained she had uncovered answers to all her questions, and decided to leave the Knights of Light. Their path had strayed, the people they protected weren't the right ones, and the household's will was corrupted. Even her father was letting it happen. She promised to visit soon, wanting to discuss many things, especially concerning her brother Ashel and Prince Luanal, and said she would explain more in person. The dean thought privately that both families were a mess, but she was still as concerned about her brother as ever. He vowed to at least pretend to care about Ashel, since she had asked him to. Turning around, he apologized to Boris for keeping him waiting so long and asked how life at the academy was going. Boris replied that he was slowly adapting. The teen wasted no time, asking why he had called him and expressing curiosity about when Boris would admit he worked for his grandson, Prince Luanal, and whether there was a reason he had been hiding it. Boris smiled, saying he wasn't hiding anything. It simply didn't relate to his work there. The teen leaned in, serious, asking what purpose he actually had there. Boris answered that he was searching for someone. When pressed if he had found that person yet, he confidently claimed he believed he had. Kundal interrupted, telling him to stop and warning that if the person Boris was after was Cyan, he should give up whatever he was planning. Kundal's aura darkened ominously. Boris felt the threat but respected his determination. Afterward, he retreated to a secluded spot to write a message, noting he hadn't expected such a reaction from Kundal and commenting that Cyan had impressive connections, becoming more intriguing by the minute. He sent the scroll skyward. Hithkria asked what the plan was now, warning that if another human got involved, things would get harder. Boris assured him he knew, and there was no need to worry. Hithkria cautioned that Karam wasn't like him. She had a physical form. Boris comforted him, saying he just needed to sever her connections first, and that it was under control. Suddenly, Hallmaster Sarika answered his summons, asking why he wanted to meet. Boris thanked her for coming. She replied she had wanted to meet him as well. Rising, he mentioned he wanted to ask about Cyan, saying he spent most of his time in his dorm, skipped lessons, yet was extremely skilled. She shrugged it off, calling Cyan a natural prodigy, and asked if that was what caught his attention. He said that initially, yes, he was just interested in our protagonist, but now he was curious about those around him too. Moving closer, he accused her of being a follower of the black fog and the mist. They both shifted into attack stances, but before she could draw her sword, Boris summoned a hellhound that swallowed her whole. Inside the beast, she managed to slice through its insides and break free. Using fog powers, she conjured a domain that enveloped them both. Boris admired her, not expecting such capabilities. She could create an entire new realm, explaining this was how she kept her mana from leaking into the real world. Sarika smirked, admitting she didn't know how he uncovered her true identity, but this revelation would cost him his life. If he desired death, she would grant it gladly. He pulled up Hithkria's book, warning her it wouldn't be as simple as she believed. She smirked, addressing him by name, Cyan, but mocking that his confidence wouldn't last much longer. Without hesitation, he summoned Marines who immediately surrounded her from every direction. In response, she called forth her fox assassins, declaring she was ready to begin his purification. At that moment, a portal materialized inside the royal dormitory, and both he and Brian stepped through. Nana immediately lashed out at him, chiding him for how much she had missed him. She had grown noticeably larger since the last time he saw her. He asked how she had been doing, and she replied she had been training diligently with Sarika, just like he had instructed her to. Over the past weeks, she had been honing her skills under the woman's tutelage. About a week ago, he had requested Sarika train Nana to control her emotional breakdowns, emphasizing that the banquets of blood must never happen again. Nana had held up remarkably well, having slain countless monsters during her training. He patted her head, acknowledging how tough that must have been for Sarika, who was known as the best at managing instincts. She kept hugging him tightly, adding there would be no training today because Sarika had other plans. He inquired what those plans were. Karam stepped forward and revealed it was purification. Sarika had been ordered to purify Boris. He asked what she meant by that. Karam explained that since Boris was an instructor, Sarika, being one herself, should have easy access to him. He was confused as to why she would take such action, and questioned whether Karam realized the opponent they were facing. She sarcastically asked if he meant the scripture, mocking him and claiming neither Sarika nor Mist could handle that. He exhaled in relief, confirming she was aware of the decree, then asked when she intended to tell him. She laughed, saying she didn't think it was necessary. He quickly gathered his belongings, stating there was no time for rest or delay. His bloodline was the real danger here. He instructed Brian to handle things in his absence, and the man reassured him not to worry. Brian asked if they should stay put or leave, and he told him to take Nana and Emily to her new screens. Brian questioned if he was going to leave the girl behind or bring her along, but he patted her head, emphasizing it was too dangerous to remain here, so they all must leave as well. He promised to return once the situation was under control, but made it clear he was leaving everything else in Brian's hands for now. Meanwhile, Sarika struggled to maintain her defense against Boris. The more she looked at him, the more repulsive he became in her eyes. All of her fog assassins had been defeated, and the marionettes continued to reappear relentlessly. She finally realized the banquets of blood had been orchestrated by him. These marionettes carried the same aura as those involved in the banquets, but these were significantly stronger. He laughed darkly, declaring this was merely the appetizer and admonishing her not to tire yet. More marionettes pressed the attack. She wielded the rushing fog stone, slicing through as many as she could to carve out breathing room, but he used scripture spells, sending shafts of light like spears flying toward her. She barely managed to evade most of them, and each time she believed she found an opening to strike, he countered immediately with more advanced spells. The number of marionettes continued to swell, and her ability to dodge diminished rapidly. They were learning her fighting style, adapting to her movements, making it far more challenging to maneuver. When one got close enough, he commanded it to detonate beside her. The explosion hurled her off balance and trapped her within a cluster of others that simultaneously exploded. Exhausted and weakened, she left herself open for an attack. He called upon the scripture to summon a massive warhammer and launched it directly at her. The hammer crashed into Sarika, driving her deep into the ground and shattering everything beneath. She lay there looking beaten while Boris mocked from above, murmuring quietly to herself. She finally understood. The marionettes could track an opponent's mana. These weren't ordinary puppets. She guessed his spellbook was the source of his power, something extraordinary given the mana she sensed. It had to be a divine weapon. He applauded her sharp battle instincts and extensive knowledge with a dry laugh, then shrugged it off, summoning a fresh wave of marionettes to assault her. Still, she refused to surrender. Rising instantly, she gathered mana and unleashed a secret fog technique called the Expansion. Her shadow grew, twisting into a demonic form, the Mammon of Greed. He froze, stunned by the sight, unable to grasp how she pulled this off. The mana he sensed from her before had vanished entirely. What new kind of mana was she tapping into? The demon swung a massive arm, crushing countless marionettes in its path. The puppets scrambled onto its body, trying to attack, but it sprouted more spikes, shredding them and absorbing their energy. He found himself at a loss. She had conjured a demon familiar whose mana surpassed all expectations, but it was a temporary shield. Now she was drained of mana herself, and even casting a simple spell would be nearly impossible. Flipping open his spellbook to strike again, he suddenly lost sight of her as she vanished and reappeared behind him, completely silent and impossible to detect. He activated Holy Protection just before she plunged a blade into his back. She unleashed a rapid barrage of strikes, slowly eroding the shield until it shattered. Before he could react, she slammed him to the ground, gripping his face and driving it into the dirt, leaving him helpless to retaliate. Just as she was about to slit his throat, an idea struck: to cast a spell without any incantation. She detonated the ground beneath them, propelling both into the air. He reacted quickly, firing judgment spears, but she dodged every one and teleported close, delivering a brutal kick to his face that slammed him into the earth, obliterating everything beneath. Gasping on the ground and struggling to rise, he heard a voice command him to stop the fight for today. Before he could react, she swooped down with a finishing strike, but the spellbook intercepted the blow. He reflected that they didn't have enough intel on her. He'd assumed she was just another of Uru's countless servants, but with skills like hers, she was likely a high-ranking officer. In his current condition, he stood no chance. She snapped into a defensive stance and noticed black blood trickling from his mouth. She recognized it as the infamous black blood of the tribe once thought extinct. He grinned, admitting this was why he avoided spilling his own. She finally realized the marionettes from the banquet were formed from blood and a tasting stone. The Black Blood tribe had originally created both, and he was the one who massacred them. He didn't deny it, confessing he'd been found out and that continuing his work would be difficult from here on. Launching another attack, she aimed to finish him for good, but as he tried to teleport away, the Mammon Summon remained firmly behind. She and the demon combined their assault on his protection, but even together they couldn't break through, until a portal tore open inside the domain. Surprised that anyone could interfere here, she watched as Cyan leapt through, slicing the protection open and creating an opening for their next assault. The shield abruptly shattered into pieces as Kara materialized, her lips curling into a smile while she watched Hearthcrea struggling to regain his breath. He demanded to know how she tracked him down, and what her purpose was here. She let out a sharp laugh, saying she could smell it. The foulness that a hypocrite like him spread in the air. He reminded her that he had already warned her she picked the wrong side. Without warning, he transformed into a larger, more imposing form, with wings broader than before, surpassing even the authority of the god's top seraphim. The shield surrounding Boris intensified, expanding in size and power, forcefully throwing Sarika out of the immediate area. Despite this, Cyan remained steadfast, resisting the overwhelming force. Even Hearthcrea stood in shock, unable to believe he could withstand the top god's authority, a power the angel couldn't endure even with the demonic sword's aid. Boris offered to assist in defeating him, pointing out that the demonic sword's wielder was right before them and must be eliminated immediately. Hearthcrea tried to intervene, cautioning that they weren't strong enough for this fight. Cyan shouted Boris's name as he tore through the shield and slashed at the angel's book, pushing deeper toward its core, intent on stabbing the seraph in the chest. He finally grasped that the black fog shrouding the sun symbolized Cyan. If this man was a blade destined to become part of Asher's future, then he was a threat that had to be eradicated. He kept repeating to himself that Cyan was someone who must be eliminated. The angel charged forward, preparing a final strike he believed would end him once and for all. Sarika noticed the surge of powerful mana charging in the air and realized Cyan wouldn't withstand it much longer. She knew she had to act before disaster struck. While he and Boris clashed, Cyan activated his unshakable root spell, freezing the seraph in place to prevent any escape. Boris countered by summoning a hellhound, aiming to devour him, but at the last moment, Sarika arrived just in time to rescue him, unleashing the secret technique called Unified Demonic Human Form. Moments later, a massive explosion erupted, shattering the entire domain around them. She remained unsurprised, sensing that this was the overwhelming force of a god's power weapon. Because they escaped, the purification mission had failed. Cyan rose to his feet, questioning why she had intervened, and she told him she had saved his life. He bent down to pick up Karam, asking if she was all right. She stayed silent for a few seconds, then said she needed some rest for a while. He knew she had probably experienced the pain directly, but had managed to endure it regardless. He promised himself that when the real battle came, he would have no choice but to use that weapon. At Brno, Commerce City near Lewin, Alice moved through the crowd searching for someone until she finally spotted the Academy's dean. She had doubted he would appear, but here he was. They found a cafe to talk somewhere more private. He mentioned it had been a long time since he left the academy, and she replied she was equally surprised, given he rarely left the school grounds. He explained it was because of the letter she had sent. The situation seemed serious now. The will of the household wasn't the main issue anymore. Ashel and Lewin represented the bigger problems. She asked if he knew anything about the man. He replied he wasn't entirely sure, then asked what she would think if Ashel became the household head. She looked down, mentioning that countless silenced citizens had joined the Knights of Light. He would likely become the leader of the Empire's most powerful army. The dean nodded, adding that Lewinel, his grandson, would probably command the knights alongside him. Alice looked up, saying that was exactly what worried her, then asked his opinion of his grandson. He glanced down, recalling that once, long ago, her brother Cyan had asked him whether he valued the Empire's prosperity or the honor of his household more. It was as if Cyan had foreseen the future. The dean admitted he hadn't been cautious enough about what they might do, his face darkening. She asked what he meant, and he told her he didn't know for certain, but urged her to leave the Empire for a while. A great disaster was looming. He would do what he could to make things right, but couldn't guarantee anything. She asked what disaster he meant, and he warned that a coup d'etat was brewing. Signs of internal conflict aimed at seizing the throne. Alice stood before the window, her mind tangled in thoughts about the coup d'etat warning. She hadn't expected Ashel and Lewinal to plot something like this. How did Dean Kendall and Cyan already know? Suddenly the door swung open, startling her as Emily and Brian stepped into the safe house. Approaching them, she greeted the pair and immediately asked if they had been living with Cyan at the academy. Emily nodded, smirking, teasing that young Master Cyan still needed her around. The idea of him sharing the academy with two women unsettled her. Brian explained he had urgent matters and had sent the three of them here. She noticed only Brian and Emily were present and realized Nana was missing. Their hearts sank. Nana had been there moments before, but they hadn't kept an eye on her. Taking charge, she stated that if this person was close to Cyan, then she was important to them too. They needed to search for her together immediately. At Bernea's harbor, a ship slipped away from the dock. The elf confirmed they were ready to depart. The werewolf commented that the bay looked especially nice this time and suggested reporting it to the captain. Before leaving, they spotted someone standing nearby, Nana, confident and serious. Leaning in, they asked if she had been abandoned by her parents. She pointed toward the distance, shouting that she smelled something familiar there. Instantly, they recognized a chance for easy profit and tried to lure her aboard by promising candy and food. Though she looked too old to fall for the candy trick, her eyes lit up at the mention. They put on friendly smiles and laughter, but she recalled Cyan's warning about strangers offering candy. Still, she pushed her doubts aside and pretended to follow them. The basement door swung open for her. Thoughts of him flooded her mind again, reminding her never to enter dark, confined spaces if someone beckoned her inside. Yet she ignored the caution and stepped in without hesitation. Once inside, the door slammed shut behind her. The elf and werewolf exchanged smiles, feeling lucky to have claimed another prize. Her eyes scanned the basement, but no candy appeared. Instead, rows of cages filled with trapped children stared back. Realizing she'd been deceived, tears welled up. Then she caught the same scent as before and followed it until she found another cage, housing a chained, terrified dog-like creature, a high-ranked monster